everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Faerie Conclave. This is episode 89. I'm your host, Alec. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm super excited to be doing a Commander deck interview today with Doni. How are you doing today, Doni?
I'm doing amazing, Alex. Alec, sorry. I'm horrible with names. But yeah, no, I'm doing really, really good. You know, Happy New Year.
Yes.
Great to be here. Glad we could finally line this up.
Yeah. I also wanted to apologize in advance. I have a friend who I grew up with whose name is Doni, spelled the same way as your name, so that might slip out. I think it has in the past, but yeah, I'll also do my best.
No worries.
I love it. But yeah, so this is the first episode of the Faerie Conclave to come out in 2023, which is very weird. That definitely has not set in entirely with me, but I guess here we are. I think there's no better way to kick it off than talking to you about a commander deck. So yeah, to introduce you a little bit, I interviewed Jen, who you're married to, I'll have to look up the episode number, but it was maybe about 10 episodes ago, and we talked about also one of her commander decks, which was really fun. And yeah, and then I was lucky enough to be a guest on one of your Twitch streams and play some commander after that, and now here you are.
Absolutely.
So yeah, you're a Twitch streamer. You and Jen do the Filthy Casuals stream, where you bring guests on and have a really nice chill vibe when you play a commander game. And I think you generally tend to I almost said record, but tend to stream on Saturday mornings, which I love because most people I think stream evenings. So I like that there's somebody on the weekends who's doing commander content. So yeah, I appreciate you for that.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time guesting on streams and this, that, and the other, and then we were like, maybe we should just start our own stream. And then we spent a lot of time on Twitch and chats and this, that, and the other. It was like, okay, there's nobody really playing at that 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So we just, decided to start streaming, and yeah, we've got, now we're doing TikToks. We just put our first podcast on YouTube last night.
Ooh.
So Jen's doing the TikTok, and so we're just kind of all over the place.
I love it. Yeah, I do appreciate how you and Jen have been super involved and active in the Magic community. So yeah, I love to see you on TikTok. And what's the name of your podcast? This is news to me.
It's the Filthy MTG Casuals.
Okay.
Casually speaking.
Okay, I like that. And you just released the first episode
yesterday.
Wow.
And we came home yesterday afternoon after running some errands, and we recorded the audio. Jen sat down, did all the video, and posted it yesterday afternoon. So yeah, we're excited.
That's amazing. Okay, yeah, I'll definitely have to go check that out, and I'll put a link to that episode in the description below. So yeah, everyone else can check it out too.
Awesome.
Cool. Okay, yeah, and so yeah, thank you for being here. I'm really excited to interview you about your commander deck. But before we get into it, let's do a quick community spotlight for the episode, which is where we give a few minutes to either a content creator or somebody in the Magic community who we think deserves a spotlight to be shown upon them. So this one came from you, Doni, who is the community spotlight for today.
So I met Keontae online probably, 2 or 3 months ago, and I think it was one of those, I was in a chat and we were vibing, and then I was like, you know what, I really want to hang out with this person. So we got him on stream, we had a great time, and it at Reversalwizrd on Twitter, but it's WIZRD. Check him out. He's just a really good dude. He's super, super into the community, and he really is everything that we represent in the community. So yeah, guaranteed a good time.
I just went and followed, and I'm excited because I can definitely see the good vibes, and that also has been happening to me a lot lately. I'll like interact with somebody and get like kind of a friend crush. I'm like, I just want to be friends with you now. I have to, like, I want to hang out more. And
exactly.
So I get that. And yeah, and I think that you can like feel out someone's vibes, especially if they are streaming and you're like playing Commander together and stuff like that. So cool, that's awesome. Yeah, I'll have the info and link to Reversalwizrd on Twitter in the episode description, so y'all can check it out too.
That's perfect.
Cool. Okay, I'm excited. Let's get into it. And before we started recording, we were kind of talking about how I had never done an episode on this commander before, which is kind of surprising because I think
it's a super high profile commander.
Yes, exactly. It's like, if it's not one of the top 10, it's like one of the top 20 and has been in the top 10 most popular commanders for a while. So yeah, let's get into it with the first question, which is, who is your commander and what inspired you to build this deck in the first place?
So this is Kenrith the Returned King. But a while back, probably a year and a half ago, the girls at Tap That MTG invited us on stream, but they wanted to do a theme, and it was creatureless. So I kicked around a bunch of ideas, and then I started thinking about, well, I've always wanted to play shrines, but I didn't want it to be too overpowering. So I have a love-hate relationship with the Door to Nothingness.
Oh.
So it was one of those things where I felt that Kenrith is a perfect commander to showcase that kind of a card.
Yeah.
So primarily what I did was I went with some of the least obnoxious shrines, and then Door to Nothingness powered by signets is the primary win con. And when I say powered by signets, I mean all 10 relevant mana has to come from an artifact.
Wow.
And it's surprising the number of times where I've gotten the door to go off.
Okay, yeah, that's awesome. That one is not an easy one to get off.
No, it really isn't. And it's just one of those things where, I mean, I've had turns where I'm like, say turn 3, I've already got like 17 mana available. And then it's just like, okay, then it's cast Kenrith and dig until we, can get to the relevant cards we need, whether it's, I'm trying to find a tutor so I can fetch the door, or, I'm trying to get a couple of key enchantments out so I can draw more cards per turn, or, any of those things. Yeah, everything kind of revolves around the door going off. And that, to me, that's what makes it so much fun.
Okay, yeah, I love that. Really quick, will you read the effects of Kenrith and Door to Nothingness?
So Kenrith's abilities, he has 5 of them, 1 for each color. The first one is red. For a single red, all creatures gain trample and haste until end of turn. Now that can get really, really interesting in a deck where the only creatures you have are coming from, they're just tokens, they're from enchantment activations. And then 1 and 1 green, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. 2 and a white, target player gains 5 life. I've used that I don't know how many times in this deck. But most importantly is the 4th ability, which is 3 and 1 blue, target player draws a card. And then finally, for 4 and a black, put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under its owner's control. So Kenrith is for me, Kenrith is primarily a political commander. Like, I can give everybody's creatures haste. I can put +1/+1 counters on creatures. I can gain people life. Not necessarily all of those abilities are going to be used on myself in this particular build.
I like that a lot. I bet that's one of the big reasons why Kenrith is so popular, is because you can use any of those abilities on any, like, targeting any player, which is, yeah, it adds so much to the political side of things. And I also like how you can build Kenrith at kind of any power level. Like, very similar to your deck, I had a Kenrith deck that was Maze's End. So it was a similar idea, except with the trying to win with getting 10 gates out. Exactly. Which is kind of similar to Door to Nothingness in that you're like searching for one card that helps you win. But yeah, I know there's also people who play Kenrith as like a CEDH thing where you use the target player draws a card ability to win with infinite mana.
Yes.
So yeah, it's kind of fun how you can go from, like a Door to Nothingness kind of very specific way to win all the way to like a competitive style. So yeah, I like that a lot.
And then the door to Nothingness, it has this like, and this is another thing that was cool. Is like Kenrith costs 1 white and 4 others. The door to Nothingness also costs 5. So like, there's some really like basement synergy there. But door to Nothingness comes into play tapped, and then you can pay double Wooburg and tap it, sacrifice it, and target player loses the game. Like, that's it. You're done. Goodbye. Move on. Would you like some fries? Go away.
Go take a break.
And just being able to trigger. I mean, it's 15 mana.
15 mana plus waiting a turn.
It's kind of just like, it's an obvious threat. Everyone knows it's coming. It's not a surprise. And like, I don't run Twiddle. I don't run anything in this deck that's going to allow me to untap it and use it automatically. So gotcha. It's literally, this. I'm pillow forting, and I'm trying to do like incremental damage with the shrines that I have. But ideally, I'm just trying to get enough mana rocks out to cast the door, and then beat somebody up with it.
I love it. I really like how you don't try to speed it up at all. So everyone has that like 1 turn chance to try to save themselves or like argue that they shouldn't be the one who dies. I think that's fun.
Yeah, make it political. Like, okay, who am I going to show the door to? Who's getting the door shut in their face? Let's figure this out.
That's good. And I have always kind of loved how Door to Nothingness does only hit 1 player, because and it also sacrifices itself, so you can't just like immediately use it again. And you gotta work to get it back.
And there's only been 1 game, like for as long as I've been playing this deck, there's only been 1 game where I actually got to activate it twice, but God, did that feel good.
Yeah, that's like a miracle moment for that, I bet.
It was.
That's awesome. I also wanted to say that I like that it has a like shrines theme also, because ever since Go Shintai came out, which was kind of the definitive like best of the best shrine commander, which is great, and I know a lot of people love that, but I always kind of enjoyed shrines for being really like on the jankier side, and you kind of had to make other commanders work with it. So I appreciate that you are still doing shrines with not Go Shintai. I think that's really cool.
No, I Sanctum of All is the best enchantments for me in this deck is Sanctum of All and Phoenix.
Is it Sunbird's Invocation?
Sunbird's Invocation, yes. Sanctum of All and Sunbird's Invocation, if I can get those 2 cards out, I'm probably going to win. Like,
nice.
It's going to be really, really hard to stop me if I get there. Because, I mean, that just feeds all of the card draw. And it feeds, I've got the direct damage shrines. I've got the discard shrines. I also run Painful Quandary, but it's like that's the card that I'm not going to play until like turn 10.
Gotcha.
Because if I can't get, or even if I can get 1 person out with the door, I still have 2 other opponents.
Right.
So it can tend for really long games if I get a decent board state up, if I've got my walls up. It can be really, really difficult to get through it, but it takes 8, 9, 10 turns to get there.
Makes sense. And I like also how you've kept with the creatureless theme, which I think is extra spicy with enchantments, because normally in like any pretty much any enchantment deck, people are gonna have like 12 enchantress effects that are usually on creatures. So I like that you just don't even have those at all. You're like not worried about the enchantresses. I think that's cool.
Enchantresses at all. I've got Sharknado's in here because it can fill the board pretty quick. Even if they're just like 1/1s, 2/2s, 3/3s, it doesn't really matter. They're active blockers. So, if I've got my Sphere of Safety and I've got my Propaganda, if I've got those out and people are still paying to get stuff through, then at least I've got something to put in front of it.
Gotcha. Yeah. I like that. And so do you have other effects that like create creatures just to have blockers, or?
Yeah. Yeah, cool. There's a couple of other I'm running Soldier 1 in Boros, Assemble the Legion.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
There's one of the green shrines. I think it's the life something or other.
That one, it makes like 1/1 spirit tokens, right?
It makes 1/1 spirit tokens. Fondant of Life's Web.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
cool.
At the beginning of your upkeep, put a 1/1 colorless spirit creature token into play for each shrine you control. And then if you get just like 2 or 3 shrines, you're getting a significant amount of creatures out if you get 1 or even 2 of these other enchantments going.
Yeah.
And then if you hit the Sanctum trigger, then everything just kind of snowballs pretty quickly at that point.
I love it. Yeah, that's what I like about enchantment decks in general, is there's just like so much value, especially in shrines when they build on each other. That's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. It can get a little confusing with your upkeep and then your pre-combat main and then your main phase triggers. Oh, yeah. I have a tendency to just stack everything up in rows so I know what's triggering when.
Yeah, that's a good call. I also my enchantment deck is a Sagas deck, and it's kind of similar. It's like Sagas trigger after your draw step, but then it'll have like upkeep triggers. So I'm like I have all these dice on things to try to track that, and
absolutely. Yep.
Yep.
Absolutely.
That's the enchantment life, I think.
Indeed.
So what is this deck's history like? What changes have you made to it since you first put it together?
I've thrown in Chromatic Lantern, and I haven't really done much with the ramp package. I'm running Arcane Denial. I added In Search of Greatness, but it's a card that kind of comes in and goes out depending on how I'm feeling. Sometimes it plays really well, sometimes it doesn't. I did recently update. I pulled a basic land out and added Vesuva because I don't think Vesuva gets played nearly as much as it should be. Anytime you can copy an Orborg or a Cradle or anything like that, it's only going to be beneficial. I'm still running Cyclonic Rift in this deck, but I'm on the bubble of removing it for something a little less obnoxious.
Yeah, makes sense.
Other than that, I do still have a Demonic Tutor, but I'm going to be cutting that for Scheming Symmetry.
Okay. Yeah, that one's a bit more political of a tutor.
and then that way the only hard tutor will be the Vampiric Tutor, and I've only ever cast the Vampiric Tutor to fetch an Arcane Denial to prevent someone from blowing my board up.
Nice, yeah.
So it's just kind of one of those where like this card made the most sense the one time I had to play it.
Yeah, I feel that. I wanted to say I'm jealous of your Replenish in this deck. That's a card I wish I could get someday for my Sagas deck, but Yeah, for those who don't know, it's 3 and a white for a sorcery that says return all enchantment cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. But it's on the reserved list, so it's like, I don't know, $1 billion.
Yeah, it's good. It's really good. But so one of the main reasons that I do run it in here is because I run a complicated board wipe between Enchanted Evening and then Tranquility. So, like, worst case scenario, if it's going super, super bad, if I've got the mana to make it work, I can cast Enchanted Evening, turning everything into enchantments, and then blowing everything up, and then floating mana as things are getting blown up to dump everything back out.
Ooh.
I've done it. I've recovered once from a board wipe with Replenish, but I've never had to pull the Armageddon button.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, if you're putting a couple cards together and you really need to, I feel like a nice restart is sometimes necessary. So, yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, if it's, if someone's going to win, and especially with the Replenish, if I can get the Replenish off, that's going to end the game.
What is it about this deck? I think I've kind of gotten a feel for why you like playing it, but you tell me, what is it that you like the most about playing this deck?
This is this is what I feel is my most casual deck, because it is Battle Cruiser. It's not going to win in 5 turns or 7 turns. I probably don't even think I can threaten to win in 10 turns. But it does create big board states. I rarely ever die first unless like everybody at the table is familiar with the deck and they're like, yeah, no, you don't get to play anything. which has happened. And then it's like, okay, well, I mean, I can help, I can be that guy. I have no problem, seeing someone else presenting lethal, but they need just that little bump. It's like, oh, I've got 8 available mana. Here's 4+1/+1 counters to put on your creatures. I have no issues with using someone else's resources to take a player out.
I do think that I'm a fan of, and I've kind of been thinking about what I want my commander decks to look like in 2023, this new year. And I think the like battle cruisery style, like every turn I'm playing cards that don't necessarily just like impact the board with their ETB effects or things like that. Like I'm kind of wanting the more like Assemble the Legion vibes, where you're like playing cards that people are like, it seems kind of weak, and then after a few turns you're like, okay, now I have a huge army of tokens type of thing. Exactly. So yeah, I can appreciate that this deck is kind of like meant for that, where you're not like putting out big bombs every turn, but instead you're kind of plotting a little bit more and trying to negotiate with your opponents.
Yeah, exactly. Just trying to buy some time until I can put myself into the most favorable board state.
So we've talked about how the goals of this deck, like the main one is Door to Nothingness shenanigans. Do you have anything else when it comes to like the goals of what you want when you're playing this deck that you'd like to talk about?
I love getting combat wins in this deck because it's so improbable. But I've had runs where I'll cast 5, maybe 6 enchantments in a turn with Sharknado out, and nice. Then it's just kind of like, all right, kids, I'm gonna just pay 1 red, and I'm gonna give all of these flying sharks haste. and just try to do some significant damage. But other than that, it's the upkeep triggers from the shrines, especially if I can get the Sanctum out and the Sanctum of Stonefangs. Yeah, with those out and the doubling from the Sanctum, it can get out of hand really, really quick.
Shrines are just so much value if you can get a couple of them. And yeah, and it feels good because people don't want to just remove one when it's on its own, but then when you have 3 or 4, they're like, uh-oh. So we
Yeah,
need to do something.
and then they got to decide, okay, well, which one's going to do the most damage? Like, well, I mean,
Yeah.
this one's going to do the most damage over 5 turns. This one's the biggest problem right now, so what do you want to do?
Yes, but then your opponents aren't going to have like generally probably they won't have like 5 removal spells that can hit enchantments.
No, they won't.
Yeah. I've always liked that about them. Yeah, I'm finding a lot of similarities between this deck and my Sagas deck because it's kind of a similar thing where these Sagas are doing terrible things to my opponents, but they're like, oh, it's gonna go away in a few turns, and like they don't really want to remove them, or they can't because they're enchantments. So yeah, I love that.
Yep, absolutely. And then I also run the white enchantment where if any of my permanents are targeted, then I get to destroy someone else's permanent. I really love that.
Yeah, okay. That's really good.
It's like, leave me alone. I'm just sitting here minding my own business. I'm not bothering anybody.
For now. Yeah, exactly. I like it. Okay, so my next question for you is, what would you say are this deck's weaknesses?
Creatures. Like,
Yep.
aggro decks, I struggle against aggro decks playing this because if I can't get propaganda or Sphere of Safety or, any of that stuff out early enough, I usually end up having to either make deals with the aggro player.
Well, you've got some pretty good deals to make. Like, Kenrith is a 5/5, which is like a very solid blocker at the very least.
Absolutely.
But I could see, like, if I'm playing an aggro deck and you said, I'll give all of your creatures haste if you don't attack me with them. Most of the time, as an aggro deck, like, you want haste at all costs. Like, that's really good. So, yeah. I would definitely be considering that deal.
Absolutely.
I like it. I also like how you've got a few ways to protect against creatures. Like, getting a Sphere of Safety out is probably just going to halt all attacks your direction. But
oh my god, it feels so good when you've got 30 enchantments in play.
Yeah, there's no way they're getting through that one.
Yep.
But yeah, so I like how like you acknowledge that as a weakness, but you're okay with it because you have this like deck building restriction around not having creatures. So yeah, I think that's really cool.
You can't win every game. You just, I mean, it's not even possible, like, in any realm. So, I like to build where, like, I'll build to a specific strength. And
cool. Yeah, I think that's how more people should do their deck building, myself included. I think that there are so many legendary creatures that come out lately in every set. I think 2022 had like, it was over like 350 legendary creatures, or like creatures that could be your commander, came out. And I think there's so many options that giving yourself some restrictions, like let's build a deck with no creatures in it, is an awesome way to kind of get your like deck building creativity going. So yeah,
absolutely,
I like that a lot. It's making me think of ideas for fun decks, kind of like that. So
and that's the goal, right? Like I just want to be, if I can be somebody's primer for the next deck they're gonna build, that's awesome. Yeah,
and you kind of have to start from somewhere. Like, I never come up with a deck idea just on my own, like staring at a card. I'm always like looking at other people's deck lists and like watching videos and stuff, and I'll like gather a couple ideas and try to find inspiration. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of what we're doing right now. So yeah, I'm into it.
The inspiration, I mean, I don't think that there's actually any original ideas anymore.
Yeah,
I just don't. So if you get that little brewing tickle when you're looking at somebody else's deck list, or you're watching the stream and you see a specific type of synergy, and that triggers you, or you're just looking at deck lists on Moxfield and you see, a handful of cards that somebody put together under this particular commander, and it just like clicks. It's like, wait a minute, what if I did this, and this, and then you just run off with that energy, right?
Yeah, it's true. It's reminding me of how I built my my mono black Evelyn deck, Evelyn the Covetous, which I got the idea from somebody else who made, I think it was a mono green Ginny Fae deck, but it's those hybrid cost legends from New Capenna. So like technically you can cast Ginny Fae just with 3 green mana. You don't have to use the other colors.
Right.
So somebody built that, and I just thought that was such a cool idea, and I was like, "Ooh, you can do Evelyn with mono black," and so I did it, and I think it's a really cool idea. But like you said, it wasn't. I didn't brilliantly come up with it all on my own. I like stole someone else's idea that was kind of adjacent, and
yep.
Yeah, and I really like that deck. It's a ton of fun. So shout out to whoever built that Ginny Fae deck originally. I'm not sure who it was, but yeah, I love that kind of thing. And that's why the community is so awesome, is because I feel like everyone who builds commander decks is excited to talk about them and kind of like introduce them to people. So there's a lot of collaboration there, which I really enjoy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. One of my most favorite things is just sitting down and playing someone else's deck. Like, not knowing what the deck list is, just, hey, let me play that. And then just trying to figure it out as you go. That's one of my most favorite things.
Yeah, I did that a couple times at the MTG Summit. I was just like, I don't know, I was tired of playing my own decks, and so we'd like trade them around a little bit. And yeah, I agree. That was some of the funnest games that I got to play there, was with other people's decks, which is kind of funny.
Yeah, it's like the Wild West all over again.
Yeah, it's true. Are there any notable cards in this deck that you want to shout out that might fill like generic roles of the deck but are a little spicier? I feel like this one has a lot because of the shrines and stuff.
There's a ton, but like really the Sanctum of All or the Chromatic Orrery. Chromatic Orrery literally solves like 80% of any mana problem you're going to have in this deck. So, you know, if you can see it, if you can get it out, and if you can keep it out, it just lends itself so perfectly. You know, you can get Kenrith, you can dump whatever mana you have available in Blurple. It doesn't matter, and you can just run away with it.
Yeah, that's a card that I always consider for decks, especially like 4 or 5 color decks, but then never quite makes it because it's 7 mana. But it's perfect in this deck because you're trying to get as much mana as you can so you can shut the door on someone's face.
Exactly. Like, perfect turn 1 is land, Soul Ring, Signet. Perfect turn 2 is at least 2 more rocks. And, you know, maybe Authority of the Consuls, or, you know, something that'll slow my opponents down a little bit. But, and yeah, like I said, I've had as much as like 13 to 17 mana on turn 3, turn 4.
Wow. Yeah, that's cool. I like it. And then you're just dropping shrines until the time comes.
Pretty much just dropping shrines or enchantments until, you know, you can build a decent enough board state and either get the door, win through combat, or just, you know, being political using Kenrith's abilities leveraged with other people's, you know, board states.
Speaking of leveraging against other people's board states, I feel like this deck would be a good one to fit really well in like any group. Like if you don't know what to expect, you could play this deck, and I feel like it would kind of adapt to the group.
Yes, and that's why I consider this to be my most casual, because it really can fit in any mana or any meta. You know, you can sit down with this deck anywhere, and you're gonna do stuff. You know, you might not win, but you're gonna do stuff.
I like that. And you can kind of interact no matter what's happening. It always feels bad when you're in a game and you, for whatever reason, like can't interact with your opponents too much, but I feel like this deck would never have that as an issue, which is cool.
Nope. Unless somebody's running like Mass Graveyard Hate and Board Wipe repeated.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Yep. Makes sense. Cool. Okay, I'm excited for this next question. Do you have any pet cards in this deck that you just can't resist playing?
My pet card in this deck is the Door to Nothingness.
Okay, makes sense.
This is probably my longest standing deck. I haven't made a whole lot of changes to it, just some minor stuff. I did try to go with a full shrine package when Ghost and Tide came out, but I built it and I played it once and I was like, no, that's not what I want to do. It was just way too easy. So, yeah, definitely the door to nothing. Every time I play this deck, that's my intent. I want to get 10 Wooburg off of shrines, and I want to close the door in somebody's face. That's what this deck is all about. Everything else that it does is secondary.
I love it. Yeah, it's kind of fun because you can kind of generally put decks into two categories. Like it's either kind of a linear strategy or a more like variety type of strategy that does a whole bunch of stuff. This one it's kind of both, which is fun.
Yep. It absolutely is.
I like that a lot. It's like you have one end goal, but you don't know exactly how you're going to get there. Like you're just trying to figure it out as you go, which is, yeah.
Exactly. One of the biggest thing about Commander, my favorite thing about the Commander format is the variance. No two games are going to be the same playing, the kind of Magic that I play.
I like it. As far as that end goal of trying to get Door to Nothingness out, what do you think is your like MVP of the deck, or the card that like gets you there, that you want to see when you're trying to do it?
Sanctum of All.
Okay.
100%. If I can get the Sanctum, everything else can kind of fall into place.
That makes sense. I don't think we had read this one earlier, but it is pretty crucial to any shrine deck. Will you read it out to us?
Sure. It's so Sanctum of All costs a Wooburg. Legendary enchantment shrine. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may search your library and or graveyard for a shrine card and put it onto the battlefield. If you search your library this way, shuffle it. If an ability of another shrine you control triggers while you control their 6 or more shrines, that ability triggers an additional time. So once you hit that 6 shrine barrier, all your triggers double. And ideally, you want to see, like, there's 2 shrines that you draw cards off of. One of them you draw for the number of shrines you have, and then I think the other one's a different, has different wording. Yeah, so Haunted of Seeing Winds, at the beginning of your upkeep, draw a shrine for each shrine you control. But then the Sanctum of Calm Waters says at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, you may draw X cards where X is the number of shrines you control. And if you do, discard a card. So the Haunted of Seeing Winds forces you to draw, whereas the Sanctum of Calm Waters allows you to draw, but it has the downside of costing you a card if you do it.
I like those differences though. Like they each kind of have a risk associated with them.
Absolutely.
But they're both going to draw you a ton of cards either way. So
they both can draw a ton of cards if you can keep them out. Absolutely.
I like it. Cool. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I think Sanctum of All is just such a cool card that for years people were playing the shrines from the first batch and just kind of making it work with whatever they could. And then this came out and now it's like, even if people destroy, like the fact that you can get them from the graveyard is so wild. It kind of pulls it all together, I think.
Yep. Super utility.
Cool. Okay. I'm into it. That makes sense. Okay. So a story time. What has been your favorite in-game moment that you've had while you were playing this deck?
So Jen and I were playing with Lewis Stardust, and I don't remember who the 4th player was, but I had the most obnoxious board state, and I was primed to go into my turn. Everyone was going to lose during my upkeep, and Lua is just screaming at me, "Doni, no!" and that has stayed with me for I mean that that moment right there is like, I knew the deck did exactly what it meant. It was the perfect game. It was the perfect outing, you know, and it was just, yeah, I will never forget the look on Lua's face when everyone was gonna die during my upkeep and nobody could do a damn thing about it.
I love that. That's great. Sometimes the best stories from a game of Commander is like an opponent's reaction to what you're doing. Sometimes that can be so satisfying.
Absolutely. Yep.
I love that. That's so much fun. That's kind of what I look for when I'm trying to build a deck. Like if I do something cool and somebody else is like, whoa, that was really cool, or very scary, I'm like, thank you. That's what I wanted.
Exactly. I got what I wanted.
I love that. That's so good. Okay, so as far as this deck goes, if anybody out there, like speaking of being inspired to build decks, if anyone out there has been inspired to build a deck similar to this, which could be a lot of things, it could be like a Shrine deck or a Door to Nothingness deck or a creatureless deck or all of the above, what advice would you give to those players who might be looking to do something like that?
All I'm gonna say is don't build something that you don't want to play against. That's my biggest thing, you know, because people always ask, well, you know, what about this and what about this? It's like, you know what? Play what you enjoy playing, but don't play what you don't enjoy playing against. Because when you do that, you're giving the people you're playing with the same exact experience you don't want. So it's just kind of like, yeah, you can totally build this deck where it is almost unstoppable. You know, yeah, board wipes are going to get it. Cyclonic Rift exists. You know, those kinds of things are always going to be out there. Those kinds of things are always going to be happening. But, you know, just make it fun, make it interesting. Try to do something different. Like, I get giddy when I do something or I play something and everybody's just like, wait a minute, what is that? What does it do? Where did that come from? Those are the moments that's just like, okay, now we're like, all of a sudden, now I'm doing something unique. And it might only be in this little tiny fishbowl that it's unique, but it's still unique in that moment in time. And that just feels really, really good.
I think that's great advice too. And I've been kind of taking that to the even smaller level where when I'm like picking cards to put in a deck, I'm like, is this just even an individual card that I enjoy seeing when my opponents play it? Like if I were playing against this card. And sometimes it's no. I'm like, when my opponents play this, I like groan a little bit. So maybe I shouldn't play it myself.
Exactly. You know, I don't play cards like Aura Shards. I don't play cards like Rock God. I don't play because they're just those cards aren't fun for me. If it's fun for you, great, no problem. You do you. But you know, you have to keep in mind this is a social game. People aren't going to want to play with people who play unfun cards. Yeah. So, you know, that is an actual mindset that exists. You know, that's why we have Rule Zero conversations. That's why, you know, I say it all the time. Not every pot is going to be perfect match. You're going to have mismatches. You're going to have, you know, power variances. You're going to have personality conflicts. You know, all of those things are going to happen as we continue to play more and more online.
Yeah.
But by you know, by having those bad experiences, it leverages us into more positive experiences because we know better what to look for. We know what, you know, better questions to ask. Have the conversation.
I like that. I'm glad that you brought that up too, because that is extra important in this era where like a lot of games are played, especially of Commander, are played on Spell Table online. And so it's really important to be good at that kind of stuff. If I can ask, what kind of questions do you ask when you have guests on to try to see if your decks will work together, if your personalities will work together? What do you do for that?
So what we usually do in the Rule Zero is we'll say, okay, what kind of experience is everyone looking for? You know, What do you want to play? What are you trying to do? And then we'll kind of flesh that out a little bit. All right. Well, someone could say, well, this is primarily a mill deck, but it does this, this, or this. And then everybody's like, okay, is everybody cool with mill? And if everybody's cool with mill, then everybody just kind of plays decks that can appropriately react to that kind of meta. It's not a perfect system, but it's been working really, really well for us. I do play commanders like I've got Xander. I've got Lord Xander, which is the goal of that deck is I'm going to mill cards. I want to mill 200, 300. I want to mill 400 cards when I'm playing that deck. But when I bring it out, I let everybody know. Lord Xander's in the command zone. It's an obvious threat. It needs to be addressed. Yeah, it's going to do something when it hits the board. It's going to do something if it goes to combat, and it will do something when it dies. It's not. It's a very obvious threat though. So yeah. And then everything else. I mean, basically everything else in that deck is just designed to copy Xander. So I mean, I've had as many as 4 copies of Xander out at one time. I've only ever won one game with that deck, and it was a combat win. I've never won on the mill plan because it's too much. It's too big. You can't. 3 people are not going to allow you to sit there and mill their library every combat. Nobody's going to let you do that. So I didn't build it because I wanted to win with it. I built it because I wanted to play that strategy. Like, I don't care if I win. If I get to cast Xander and I can get one of each of his ability triggers, it doesn't matter what happens the rest of that game. I did what I came to do.
I like it. And I think the kind of key there is, for me, I'm generally willing to play against any type of deck at least once. But the important key to it is being honest about what your deck is doing. So I loved your description of your Xander deck where you're like this, if you get Xander out, it's going to be a problem that you're going to have to deal with. So then your opponents can kind of can understand that at the beginning, that they will need to keep an eye on that.
Exactly. So, I'm not hiding anything. And I think honesty, when it comes to Rule Zero, honesty is the best policy.
Yeah.
You tell people what your combos are, what they should be looking out for. A really great question is, how soon are you trying to go off? Like, when do we need to be concerned? Like, do we need to be hyper aware at turn 4, turn 5? Sometimes you can get a really, really aggressive deck that starts off slow and doesn't really do much for 5 or 6 turns, but then turn 7, it's like the fire hose is on and everything's happening.
Yeah.
So really, I think those are really the most important questions. What kind of experience you're looking for, and how soon are you looking to win? Because I think all the other things that happen between those 2 steps can be sorted out by, how everybody wants to kind of react to that game plan.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think a normal game of Commander with 4 people is pretty self-balancing, in that if somebody does something wild, there are 3 other people that can kind of try to take care of it.
Exactly.
And but the experience of the people is it's very dependent on how honest you are with what your deck is doing and what its strategy is and what cards you're playing, and everything we just talked about. So
there's no reason to be sneaky. I would 100% be okay with sending the deck lists that I want to play to everybody in the pod before the game. I would have no issue with that. I've done it. I've had people request that. Yeah, sure. Here's a deck list. This is what I'm doing. We still have the conversation, but then it's like they have all of the information at that point. There's you can't sneak anything by them.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to do it, because everyone, this is kind of why the power level by numbers system doesn't work, because every person has a different idea of how it works. Yeah. And so I've had times where I'm going on a new stream with new people, and they're like, oh, it's kind of a medium power level, and then they'll send a deck list and it'll have 8 tutors in it, and I'm like, Okay, 8 Tutors says something a little bit different to me, but that doesn't really matter because you sent me your list. I can work with that and find something that is, similar. So
yeah, I mean, you've got 8 Tutors. That just means I'm going to have to run something that has an equal amount of interaction.
Right, yeah, exactly, which is what I did. So I just picked a deck that I thought would match up well with that list, and it worked out great, and we had a fun time. So yeah, even though you might describe your deck in like different language than somebody else might, I think, yeah, sending the deck list is a great way to kind of just have everyone take a look at it and see what they think. So yeah. I like that. Well, I didn't really mean to get into a Rule Zero conversation, but I loved it. Thank you so much. I really, I think I agree with everything you said, and it shows on your streams. Everything, from what I can see, it looks to be balanced, and like everyone's having a good time and is comfortable with what they're doing. So, yeah, keep it up. I love it.
No, that's all we're trying to do. We're just trying to continue to be worthy to the community that has accepted us.
Cool. And speaking of the community, thank you so much for coming on and talking to me about your clear passion for it and your Kenrith deck. It's been a ton of fun.
It's been a great experience, Alec. It's always a good time hanging out with you, bud.
Yes, I totally agree. Yeah, and I couldn't think of a better way to kick off the year 2023 than with this episode with you, Doni. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on. I will have all of the links to your stream and your link tree so people can find you and interact with you in the episode description. But before we sign off, is there anything you want to kind of like plug or anything you have coming up that you want to shout out?
You know what? January is going to be really, really weird for us. Our streaming schedule is going to be kind of hit and miss because we've got some travel coming up. But we're just, I finished doing the numbers yesterday for last year, and we played 388 games.
Wow.
We recorded the games, like not actual video recording, but we wrote down 388 games we played last year. So we're looking to maybe put a dent in that number for 2023.
Nice. That's very impressive. I'll have to do the math too, because I believe that I probably played as much Commander in 2022, like probably more than I had in like the 5 years before that, just because it was my thing this year. So yeah, I love that you were able to calculate that. That's a very impressive number of games.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I know that I've seen people do like calculations and do some stats on like how many games did the person who played a turn 1 Sol Ring win, or kind of things like that. And I bet you could get some really interesting insight with such a high number of games on your stream. So
you absolutely can. And like we were just talking last night about adding some data points, maybe annotating who won, and well, we already annotate who won, but annotating like how they won, like what was the last play of the game, or that kind of thing. So yeah, I find stuff like that really interesting, but I would definitely need like an intern to go through all of that and calculate all of it. Lord knows. I feel exactly the same.
I love it. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure, Doni. I appreciate you coming on and chatting with me for an hour. It's been so much fun. Y'all should, if you haven't already, you should go follow and subscribe to the Filthy MTG Casuals on Twitch. And yeah, check out their weekend streams. It's always a good time. And yeah, and if you want to find me, I've got links down below as well for the Faerie Conclave. I also recently have been posting some stuff on TikTok, which is a lot of fun. I think TikTok it kind of slaps when it comes to Magic creators. So yeah, definitely go check that out if you want to.
Absolutely.
I love it. Cool. And yeah, besides all that, I think that's everything I've got. So thank you all for listening and joining today, and I will catch you on the next one.